In this segment, we are looking at one politician and one story he has repeated for more than 3 decades. Benjamin Netanyahu and his claim that Iran is always just a few years away from the bomb. We are going to start with a short clip from Al Jazeera titled Benjamin Netanyahu's 33 Years of Iran Nuclear Warnings. It runs for just under 3 minutes and tracks his statements from the early 1990s to the present day.
You've probably heard this line before.
Iran has never given up its quest for nuclear weapons and the missiles to deliver them.
That's because Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been saying this for more than 30 years, claiming Iran is close to having
nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons. Atomic bombs.
In 1992, as a member of parliament, Netanyahu addresses the Knesset. He says, within 3 to 5 years, we can assume that Iran will become autonomous in its ability to develop and produce a nuclear bomb. 3 years later, in his book Fighting Terrorism, he repeats the same time frame, 3 to 5 years.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Fast forward to 2002. Netanyahu testifies before a U.S. congressional committee actively calling for the invasion of Iraq.
Are there any other nations that you would recommend that the United States launch preemptive attacks upon at this point?
The 2 nations that are vying, competing with each other, who will be the first to achieve nuclear weapons, is Iraq and Iran.
The invasion happens months later. No weapons of mass destruction are found in Iraq. This is a fragment of a 2009 U.S. State Department cable released by WikiLeaks. Netanyahu tells members of Congress that Iran is 1 or 2 years away from being capable of developing nuclear weapons.
They're online.
It's 2012, and Netanyahu is holding up his infamous cartoon bomb at the UN General Assembly.
By next spring, at most by next summer, at current enrichment rates, they will have finished the medium enrichment and move on to the final stage. From there, it's only a few months, possibly a few weeks, before they get enough enriched uranium for the first bomb.
And now, 33 years after Netanyahu's first so-called imminent warning, Israel attacks Iran.
And if not stopped, Iran could produce a nuclear weapon in a very short time. It could be a year, it could be within a few months, less than a year.
That's despite the U.S. Director of National Intelligence saying Iran isn't building a nuclear weapon months earlier.
Iran lied.
But for Netanyahu,
Big time.
the slogan has been the same for decades. Dmitry Medvedenko, Al Jazeera.
What you have just watched is not a one-off mistake or a single bad prediction. It is a pattern. In 1992, as a member of the Knesset, Netanyahu told Israeli lawmakers that within 3 to 5 years, Iran would be able to produce a nuclear bomb. 3 years later, in his book Fighting Terrorism, he repeated the same time frame. There was no bomb. In 2002, he went to Washington and testified before a United States Congressional Committee, pushing hard for the invasion of Iraq. He told American politicians that Iraq and Iran were competing to be first to get nuclear weapons, and that war would bring democracy to the region. The invasion happened. Iraq was shattered. No weapons of mass destruction were found. By 2009, according to a United States State Department cable released by WikiLeaks, Netanyahu was claiming again that Iran was 1 or 2 years away from nuclear capability. In 2012, he walked onto the United Nations stage with that infamous cartoon bomb, drawing a thick red line and warning that Iran was only weeks or months away from enough enriched uranium for a first weapon. Fast forward to today. The clip you saw ends with Netanyahu justifying fresh Israeli attacks on Iran, claiming once more that if not stopped, Tehran could produce a nuclear weapon within months. Yet only months earlier, the United States Director of National Intelligence had told Congress that Iran was not currently building a bomb. So what is going on here? Why does the same man keep moving the deadline on the same alleged existential threat? Part of the answer is ideological. Netanyahu built his political career on the idea that Israel is surrounded by irrational enemies who can never be trusted. In that worldview, diplomacy is weakness, and only overwhelming force can guarantee survival. Iran, with its size, oil wealth, and support for Palestinian resistance groups, is the perfect villain. Part of the answer is domestic. Every time his government faces crisis over corruption cases, settler violence, or mass protests inside Israel, the specter of Iran returns. A looming nuclear apocalypse distracts from questions about occupation, apartheid, and the crushing of Palestinian life in Gaza and the West Bank. It rallies Western allies who would rather talk about hypothetical future weapons than about actual present-day bombing campaigns. And part of the answer is strategic. The constant drumbeat about an imminent Iranian bomb has helped justify real military actions. Cyber attacks that destroyed centrifuges at Natanz, assassinations of Iranian scientists on the streets, hundreds of airstrikes in Syria, now direct strikes inside Iran itself. Each step is presented as reluctant self-defense, yet each one escalates the risk of a wider regional war. This is not to romanticize the Iranian state. Tehran's rulers commit their own human rights abuses. They support armed groups, including some that target civilians. But acknowledging that reality does not excuse a 33-year campaign of threat inflation that has repeatedly been used to sell wars abroad and repression at home. When you strip away the graphics and the dramatic speeches, Netanyahu's message has barely changed since the early 1990s. Iran is always on the edge of the bomb. War is always just around the corner. Time is always running out. The fact that the deadline keeps moving has not stopped that narrative from killing real people in Iraq, in Syria, in Iran, and in Palestine. As viewers, we have a responsibility to remember the history. The last time Western leaders and their allies told us that a Middle Eastern country was months away from weapons of mass destruction, it paved the way for the destruction of Iraq, the rise of extremist groups, and untold human suffering. We cannot afford to let recycled fear campaigns be treated as wisdom simply because they are delivered in confident English at elite podiums. This is Sheppard Lens Media, independent, unfiltered, human. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe to the channel.